Good evening from Los Angeles. Today, President Obama went to Facebook headquarters in Palo Alto, California, where he held a live-streamed town hall. The president took questions for more than an hour from people in the room and online. Most of the questions were related to the current debate over how to reduce the deficit. The president led off by telling Facebook founder Mark Zuckerberg that he wants to raise his taxes.
What we've said is, let's take another $1 trillion of that we raise through reforms in the tax system that allows people like me, and frankly you, Mark, for paying a little more in taxes. I'm cool with that. I know you're okay with that. Keep in mind, what we're talking about is going back to the rates that existed when Bill Clinton was president. Now, a lot of you were I'm trying to say this delicately, still in diapers at that time, but for those of you who recall, the economy was booming, and wealthy people were getting wealthier. There wasn't a problem at that time. If we go back to those rates alone, that by itself would do a lot.
The president was asked if he thought the House Republican bill authored by Budget Chairman Paul Ryan was, quote, bold.
The Republican budget that was put forward, I would say, is fairly radical. I wouldn't call it particularly courageous. I do think Mr. Ryan is sincere. I think he's a patriot. I think he wants to solve a real problem, which is our long-term deficit. But I think that what he and the other Republicans in the House of Representatives also want to do is change our social compact in a pretty fundamental way. Nothing is easier than solving a problem on the backs of people who are poor, or people who are powerless, or don't have lobbyists, or don't have clout. I don't think that's particularly courageous.
And the president gave his most personal account yet of how government programs have affected his life.
You know, I wasn't born wealthy. I was raised by a single mom and my grandparents. I went to college on scholarships. There was a time when my mom was trying to get her PhD where, for a short time, she had to take food stamps. My grandparents relied on Medicare and Social Security to help supplement their income when they got old. So their notion is, despite the fact that I've benefited from all these investments, my grandfather benefited from the GI Bill after he fought in World War II, that somehow I now have no obligation to people who are less fortunate than me, and I have no real obligation to future generations to make investments so that they have a better future.
But the town hall in California is not the only one that is making news today. A town hall hosted by Congressman Ryan in Milton, Wisconsin yesterday got heated when the subject of tax cuts for the wealthy came up.
The top 1% will steady about 10% of the total annual income. Yet today we are fighting to not let the tax rates for the wealthy expire, and we're fighting to not raise the Social Security cap from $87,000. I think we're wrong.
Yeah. So, a couple things on the cap.
Well, we do have to lower spending, but it's a matter of there's nothing wrong with taxing the top because it does not trickle down.
We do tax the top. Let's remember, most of our jobs come from successful small businesses. 2/3 of our jobs, you got to remember these businesses pay taxes individually. So when you raise their tax rate to 44.8%, which is what the president is proposing, I would just fundamentally disagree. That is going to hurt job creation.
Joining me now is Chris Hayes, Washington editor of The Nation and MSNBC political analyst. Thanks for joining me tonight, Chris.
Great to be here, Lawrence.
Chris, I have to believe that if the White House could show only one town meeting today, it would be Paul Ryan's town meeting with that reaction on the top tax cuts. That's better than anything the president could do on his own, isn't it?
It is, and I thought when I first saw the clip, I was like, good for those progressives or whoever those folks were in Paul Ryan's district who came out to the town hall. That was the lesson of those town halls, right? Back in 2009, 2010 was like, if you show up and you make noise, you can really sort of confront your congressman in a way that's going to be advantageous to your political position. So I was like, way to go, way to show up at the town hall. But no, absolutely, and I think it illustrates something broader than just what was in sentiment in that room. The staples of the Ryan plan are fundamentally not just on the margin unpopular. They are wildly unpopular. 80% plus do not want to see Medicare abolished, and there's a strong majority among Republicans of whom that's true. The most popular method of reducing the deficit when you put it to the American people are defense cuts and raising taxes on the wealthiest. So the agenda of cutting taxes for the wealthiest and getting rid of Medicare is about as unpopular a political program as you could come up with in terms of domestic policy.
It sounded to me at the Facebook town hall today that the president began to find his voice in how he defends government spending and government programs, and he uses history to do it, talking about the GI Bill, talking about his grandfather's use of that, talking about his own experience growing up, even his mother on food stamps at a certain point, personalizing it. You could hear the quiet in that room as he was giving his personal account of how this has affected him, showing how real these things are. Is that what we're going to have to hear more of from the president?
I love the section that you just talked about and that you played earlier, because so much of the appeal of the Barack Obama story, to a certain level, is this very mythologized story of up by your bootstraps, Horatio Alger, sort of American meritocratic achievement. He is the crowning achievement of the sort of post-60s meritocratic social order. And that story is so often told about sort of equal opportunity and individual virtue and individual stick-to-itiveness, and not the way that it's embedded in a society and a social safety net and a political system that confers stability and also has a sort of redistributive aspect that makes all that success possible. And I thought it was an incredibly powerful way of sort of distilling that fundamental point and contrasting it with the kind of no obligations. I really liked when he said what they want to do is fundamentally reorder the American, or fundamentally change the American social compact. I think that's a true statement about the Republican vision, and I think it's also a really politically effective message.
Chris, it seems to me the president is better on this subject the longer the plane ride. Because he had to fly all the way to California, yeah. I think it feels to him like he's back on the campaign trail, and this actually counts. This is really where it's on the line.
Yeah, I also thought, it's interesting. I also thought the level of conversation was extremely elevated. I mean, the questions in the town hall were, I thought, really smart. There was a woman who stood up from Detroit who's a Facebook employee who basically said, how did our conversation shift from job creation to all we talk about is deficits? I thought the question about healthcare cost containment, which led to a very, very fluent recitation by the president of cost of healthcare delivery system reform. All of that was operating at a very high level. And in some ways, that's where Barack Obama is at his best, speaking like an adult to other informed adults.
There is something to be said for a smart audience. Chris Hayes, thanks for your time tonight.
Thanks a lot, Lawrence.